noted that the two strongest positions for any planet in any chart was just before the midheaven in the 9th and just before the ascendant in the 12th house. And the ascendant planet seems to denote temperament, which leads to your avocation. You're temperamentally inclined to be a scientist if you've got Saturn in just before the ascendant and say something else just before the midheaven, if that agrees with Saturn. So if we look at these two positions, just before the 10th and just before the 12th, just before the ascendant, we get a very good idea of what a person wants to do with their life because they're temperamentally disposed to doing it. So the diurnal travel of the planets is clockwise through the natal chart. They go this way round. So the planets cross the horizon in the east, the left-hand side of the chart, or dawn of the natal chart, and are first exposed in the world in the 12th house, the first house above the horizon. Planets in the 12th house represent the energies we first put forth in the world. This house, as I said, was temperament, our personal unconscious, and most importantly of all, 12th house planets represent doing what comes naturally. We don't have control over how these energies are expressed or used as we do over first house planetary energies, which we use when we actually interact with the environment. 12th house energies just spill out. They are just what we are. They are just what we temperamentally express. We have no control over them. I think the 12th house planets represent the overblown, the raw, unrefined, take it as it comes, obviously immature, unmoulded energies and drives. Planets are our drives, remember. They manifest in certain types of energy. Mercury is our communication energy. Mars is our petrol in the engine. The Sun's the engine, if you like. Because 12th house planets are expressed strongly in an unmoulded, unrefined way, society in the form of parents, church, school, or anything you like to call authority, promptly makes the child try to conform to worldly ways. Don't express your Mars like that. Do it this way. Don't express your Mercury like that. Do it this way. What do people think? Syndrome comes pouring in on a 12th house planetary person. But the energy cannot be expressed in a confined, balanced and refined way. It is not refined. It's unrefined, raw temperament, and it's very friable and it's very vulnerable. This is precisely what happens to 12th house energies. They crumble in an effort to conform to society, parental authorities, expectations, and because of this they are pushed not into the personal unconscious, which is 4th house, moon, into the deep unconscious, collective unconscious. They are so, the 12th house person is so shattered with what happens to them that it goes deeper than the personal unconscious, right? That's why it's harder to get at. So many 12th house Mars people come from families where children had to be seen and not heard, where there was a sick person in the house, or for some reason the family couldn't accept Mars type, overblown, because it was 12th house energy. But energy never goes away. You can remember this when you're doing transits. If you use up the energy of a transit, 2/3 of it, you've only got 1/3 to use somewhere else. Energy never goes away. It has to be put somewhere and expressed somehow. The energies that are expressed in raw fashion because they are felt by the child to be unacceptable are put down with much force and emotion. The child feels guilty, that he feels even this drive, this energy, that he is the person he is. So the drive is suppressed and repressed with a great deal of emotion and above all guilt. What we want above all else is to be accepted by society and most of all by our parents. But as I said, energy never goes away. So it seeps out and is expressed subtly and covertly by the owner of a 12th house planet. So what is guilt? Guilt, simply put, is violation of the ideal image of what we are manifested in the way we behave, i.e., if we have an ideal that we behave, we are a very considerate person, and we do an action that is not considerate, we violate the ideal we have of ourselves, and so we cop guilt.
I'm finding your pace of speaking quite difficult to follow. It's really hard to take notes because you're going to those. I know you probably have a lot to get through in a short time.
I try to slow down. I've got Mercury in the T-square. I'll try. I suggest I would do my bit. If it's still too fast, by the tape, because it will be on the tape and things. It's such a lot here. I mean, I can't half do a 12th house, It's my temperament to go a little bit faster, so I'll try. So what is guilt again? Guilt is violating our own ideals of the way we should behave. And Carol Squires and Chris Turner threw me by saying, hey, but somebody else can make you feel guilty. So I thought about that one and dragged on my psychology, small psychology diploma. And I think other people can say you should have ideals. And if you yourself have an ideal that coincides with somebody else's ideal and you've violated it too, you then go into guilt. Guilt is entwined with resentment, is a form of self-indulgence combined with masochism to exonerate oneself for one's considered crime. And a child with a 12th house planet does feel a bit like a criminal. The rationale goes something like this. If I feel guilty, it is excruciatingly painful, and therefore in punishing myself with this pain, the pain of guilt is excruciating, I am atoning for my supposed crime. The crime of expressing a planet in a certain way. As we get older, it gets even more martyr-like in Piscean. I am punishing myself for not living up to my impossibly high ideals of standards of behaviour. Now, Neptune's very necessary. If you've ever been in a Saturn period and had the ideal shattered and you're living in a grey, concrete, utterly real world of Saturn, it's dull, it's horrible, it's awful, and it's grey, like a block of timber flat. But you have to have Neptune there. But if you go too far with Neptune and you constantly don't get the ideal out there and everybody else's grass is greener, you also are very, very unhappy. So I think what we have to do with 12th house ideals and the ideal we have of ourselves is to lower it enough for it to be practically possible to have these ideals. So when you next hit guilt, think, are my ideals of myself too high, too unrealistic? Lower them to Saturn's level, so that you can actually keep up with them and you don't cop so much guilt. Underneath the guilt and resentment is a demand to defy a belief pattern or a moral stand taken by society, parents. If you look at that closely, you'll find that's true, I think. In the case of a child with 12th house planet, he wants to defy his parental stand that he cannot express himself the way he wants to. But you can have 12th house Saturns wanting to defy the stand taken by the authority of his church. So, remember also that a 12th house planet child sucks into their unconscious things that a person without a 12th house wouldn't suck into their unconscious. You've got two Mercuries, one's in the 12th house, one isn't. You say to the 12th house Mercury, I don't understand you, go away and play, I don't want to talk to you, you talk too much. And that child goes whoom with his Mercury. The other child, just be quiet, I want you to, I'm not ready right now to listen to you. Okay, away you go, no hassles. So the 12th house child sucks in situations that people without 12th house planet don't suck in. So the two meet. You do it, I do it, we all with 12th house planets do it. But we're doing it because we are so sensitive. The pattern is then set. Expression in a raw, strong, overblown, unmoulded way of a 12th house planet. Strong criticism or punishment by society and or parents, leading to fear, emotion and guilt, followed by repression to a very deep level of the unconscious. Mars and Saturn appear egotistical and arrogant when they're in the 12th house and not seen nor heard nor dealt with. Venus, self-indulgent and lazy. Jupiter, everyone else but me is wrong. Saturn, the rules of the game of life are too tough and must be altered to suit my fears. Uranus, why shouldn't I be as individualistic in any way I choose, even if I am the odd man out? Neptune, leave me with my dreams. Reality is too awful to be faced. There are too many obligations in the real world, and if I don't fulfill them, I'll feel extra guilty. The Moon, why shouldn't I be as emotionally demanding as I want or need to be? Mercury, what is wrong with the way I speak and think? Why doesn't anyone listen to me? And Pluto, well, we'll come to Pluto. It's a bit too complex. A quick skim trite, which we thought that was then. I'll go into them deeper.
What did you say the sun was?
Arrogant and egotistical, when it's first expressed before it's repressed, because it's just overblown. It's a raw energy. No judgment here, no damnation. It's just automatically expressed that way because it's raw and unmoulded initially. Illness, incidentally, can be a 12th house attempt to force the guilt on other people, to get what one wants in the way that one wants it covertly. Or it can be a temper tantrum to the cosmos for not being allowed to behave in the way one wants to, in the head I might add, when and how one wants to. Naturally enough, behaviour that one is forced to repress in oneself arouses very strong, raw emotion when one sees it in others. Therefore, to meet ourselves in another, or our own repressed behaviour in another, arouses guilt again, and tremendous feelings of, I can only come up with uncomfortability, it seemed the best way, which seemed to well up into the unconsciousness from you know not where, because it's been repressed to a very deep level. We cannot use the triad of a 12th house planet openly, because apparently it was unacceptable. And because it never goes away, as I said, it seeks out backdoor fashion, clearly seen in our behaviour by other people, but never by us. So we get very subtle, provocative behaviour from a 12th house Mars person who stirs other people up. So they react aggressively back to the person who then declares it's always them, never dreaming that it might be me. The karmic tag to the 12th house seems to me to occur because no one in their right mind would deliberately choose to have a raw, unrefined, unmoulded energy expressed as their temperament. So it must have been something that's meted out by the gods as a punishment for something done in a past life. And I agree with Robert Hand here that this superimposes our own Judeo-Christian morality onto a 12th house person. And I ask, what right have we to this? And are we right anyway? And we have no proof whatsoever, and so how dare we as astrologers do this? So unrefined energy repressed into the subconscious is expressed backdoor fashion with much greater strength and power because it has been put down with emotion, with sorrow, with guilt, and with grief, and with resentment. Hence it becomes the hidden enemy, the spy within the city gates. And of course, if we meet such energy expressed by anyone else, as I said, we feel massively uncomfortable. How dare they be so arrogant to the 12th house sun? I hate seeing love and affection expressed in public, says Venus. I'm rendered frightened and helpless by someone else's anger, says Mars. Of course we feel uncomfortable. All the sorrow, the guilt, and the resentment, and the bitter memories are given a good stirring by meeting somebody else who expresses our 12th house. And given a good stirring in the deep unconscious, which is even more provocative of acute restlessness and turbulence in our feelings and our manner. But, as I said, energy just cannot be got rid of, cannot be done away with. So, if it is allowed expression, it can be transformed. Hence, 12th house people need solitude, where the apparently uncomfortable energy, when expressed out in the world, can express itself quite happily while you're on your own, in the peace and quiet of your own company. Mars and Uranus obviously are never peaceful and quiet, so that you have to do something with them that uses up the inner restlessness you even have in the peace and quiet of your own company. You can use it up physically or mentally. Here we come to the mechanism of inner strength. The 12th house Mars person can accomplish much work done in private, does not need anyone to goad them on. They possess an inner drive and courage to cope with life that is of greater strength than a Mars rising person or Mars in the first house. You can take many courses now. There are literally hundreds, I can almost say, without doing a sad exaggeration, in Sydney of awareness and psychotherapy, and you choose your mode and just go and do it if you want to get at your 12th house. But wait for a good transit. I'll go into that later. And the Mars person can express the I want it my way and I want it now, subtly, in their own company. That's what Mars does, subtly, covertly. I want it now and I want it my way. And so they cause greater backfiring than if they had gone after what they wanted openly and overtly. By trying to get the thing backdoor fashion and get what you want by not stating it openly, you cause a greater reverberation back onto yourself than if you just straight out with Mars. So 12th house people need to go through whatever they feel they need to do if they really want to get at it. Now this is a very important mechanism with 12th house because the 12th house planetary has been disowned way back there by the owner of it, so to speak. It is split off from the rest of the psyche. It's not integrated. And because it's not integrated, it's literally out of control. And this is why it comes out like this. Boom, boom, boom. Why the arrogance of the sun and so on comes out like that. Because it's split off from the rest of our psychic contents. and it's not under our control. And this is why you shouldn't, I shouldn't, nobody should, damn a 12th house person. It's not under their control. It's literally there just expressing. In practical reality, when we first bring our 12th house into consciousness and you see how it's working, you go the other way. I use Mars because I have Mars there. And I became arrogant, bombastic, as it came up and went out. And I overdid it in the other way. And then I saw that was equally unbalanced as being buried down in the 12th. So you swing back as you go through psychotherapy, or whatever you choose, and you come back to a nicely balanced Mars, hopefully. I mean, it still does it, but I see it, you know. So that it's not a 12th house hidden. Well, there are times when obviously you don't see everything, but you know, it's much more out in the open. So the 12th house person may also find themselves constantly weary and tired. This is because the mechanism of repressing a fundamental drive of your psyche takes up a lot of energy. This energy is not available then for use in the process of daily living. The more one comes to terms with the 12th house energy and can release them of one's own volition, the less tired you'll be. The more you use your Venus, publicly expressing affection, the less tired you'll be because you're not trying to keep it under control and repress down there. Do you follow me? Right. Planets, usually the personal planets, can progress out of the 12th house. Progressions come this way, planets go that way. So progressions coming out here. You can get Mars or Venus or whatever it is in your 12th. It's usually your personal planet because the others move so slowly. Out into your ascendant and your first house. And then you see it. And it's usually an incident that triggers this. Say you get married, you've got a 12th house Venus and you don't like showing affection in public. And you get married. And your partner says, well, you're so strange with me, you won't even hold my hand when we go to the theatre. You realise then that you've got to do something about that drive that's been repressed. And you then have to look at the contents of that planet in your 12th house, because your partner's making you look at it. Do you follow me? And you often get married when progressed Venus is on your ascendant. So it forces a psychological reassessment of the 12th house energy. Usually we pick partners who've got the same taboo in their family that we have. You get families that will not express anger. So you pick a partner that has the same family taboo as your family, and you both agree to never express anger and put it behind your collective partnership screen. But this doesn't work because you're both using a lot of energy to hold that away. So you get whatever the planet is, you suddenly get boom in the family, and out comes this energy from your collective partnership screen, and gets used up in a violent way. I think there's a book on the market now which is written in very clear terms called Families and How to Survive Them by Robin Skinner and John Cleese. And that goes into 12th house quite a lot and shows how we come into agreements like we mustn't express anger, we mustn't show love, and all these sorts of things. Alternatively, we may project and blame our partner for our own hang-up. And then we can end up with horrific Virginia Woolf, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf type of relationship. The transiting conjunction of Saturn and Pluto through Libra provided, it was in the early 1980s, a magnificent, hair-raising opportunities for all those people with Libra and 12th houses, or end of Virgo 12th houses, to walk through the burning fiery furnace of the 12th house integration. And you have another chance now, with Scorpio coming into Sagittarius 12 houses, with Saturn and Uranus going through these areas. It's onion skin time. We peel off layers of conditioning from our personal psychic garbage bags. The other chance you can have to look is progressed moon going through the 12th. That gives you a chance to have a look at what might be in your 12th house. You need something to trigger you to have a go. I find the transiting moon through the 12th house helps me an awful lot. It's generally a time, that's the moon going through all the time in the 12th house. It's a time when you start remembering your dreams more vividly. It's a time when you want solitude, and very often if it passes a 12th house planet you get a glimpse of how that planet works, and it may be through a dream, but anyway it's a time to have a go. So if one exposes through whatever means you feel like exposing your 12th house planet by whatever course you want to go on, you can feel very nude. It's like being caught like a flasher in the middle of a busy metropolis. You've peeled off all these layers of your psychic hang-ups and so on, and then you have to express this 12th house. And you feel terribly exposed, really. But then you come to accept your birthday suit with quite a degree of nonchalance because of the psychological freedom you have. You've got so much more energy. You're not holding down your 12th house. You say, all right, look at my Mars, look at my Uranus, So what? And then you feel, I don't care if I'm exposing myself. And in the end you get so that you're downing barriers, which is 12th house, into the flow, So, before going to look at the individual planets in the 12th, may I remind you that we all have a 12th house, and you will find that the ruler of the cusp of the 12th house is as strong as if you had a planet in it, especially if it's in hard angles. Pardon? Especially if that ruler of the 12th house cusp is in hard angles. It feels as strong as if you've got a planet in there. So if you're all here with 12th house planets and they're not, don't think that they haven't got any hang-ups, anything to deal with in the 12th house. We all have a 12th house.
When you have the ruler in your 12th house,
you really have to look at it. If the ruler of the 12th house, the ruler of the 12th house rules another house. Say the ruler of the 12th house rules the 9th house. Initially you have great problems with usually it's religion. Your parents' religion has caused you problems, and you felt the authority of the church was too much for 12th house planet, or 12th house. If the ruler of the 12th is in the 9th, you have hassles initially, and then you get your secret comfort from the 9th. If the ruler of the 7th is in the 12th, you have hassles with relationships initially, but then your secret support comes from your partner, and you are his support. If the ruler of the 6th is in the 12th, then you get your support. Initially you have troubles perhaps with health and work, but then ultimately that's where your strength lies. Do you follow me? Okay? And this also applies if the planet in the 12th rules other houses. Say you have Uranus in the 12th and it rules 6th house. You may be a very good acupuncturist. You may have unusual ideas with your work and so on like that. And initially you have trouble, and then that's where your secret support comes from. So the 12th house planet has many advantages. Also take all the angles from the ruler of the cusp into the 12th house. Take all the angles of planets in the 12th house into the 1st house. If you have Mars in the 12th house and it squares Pluto, take Pluto into the 12th house. You have a touch of Pluto there, and you have to deal with it. So it's not just a simple thing, it's like any house, it's quite complex. Yeah, you'll find, I have a double Libra, I'm Libra ascendant and a Libra 12th house, and I found there's a lot of the things I found myself writing about Venus applied to me. I thought, what's got this stuff on this paper? This is me.
My 12th house planet could aspect everything in my chart. I'm going to leave that.
But why is that a bad thing? You're taking this is why Bernadette does her research. She's taking all the energies round the chart for the strength of the 12th house, for goodness sake. This is what I'm trying to say. You've got all that talent to work on your own, your deep research, to come out with unusual ideas, because it's linked to the 12th house. Right? Right. None of you going out here with a hang-up or a hangover. So, take all that into the 12th house. If, like me, I'll give you an example. I've got Libra ruling the 12th house as well as the ascendant. Venus, to some extent, my family was one of those stiff upper lips English sorts that didn't show affection. So, as well as Mars, I had to look at Venus, take it in, and then treat it as a 12th house planet for the purpose of getting at it anyway. It's not quite so strong, perhaps, but sometimes it is, depends on the aspect.
As you get on, if you have Pisces ruling both houses, it's in the
take Neptune in and listen to the delineation of Neptune. It's the Pisces on the 12th you have to look at. So taking Neptune and its aspects into the 12th house.
It's a parallel.
Pardon? Take them both in. Take them both in.
Intercepted houses.
Pardon?
The intercepted houses.
Yeah, take the role of the intercepted house in its aspects too. Right, we're looking at the Sun in the 12th and the Leo cusp on the 12th. The Sun here usually indicates a child who had no psychological contact with the father and feels a big hole in his experience of childhood. The temperament, basically raw, unrefined in childhood, is I want to be noticed and I want to be famous. And the Sun here does not deny it. the possibility of being famous is exemplified by Jimmy Carter and Henry Kissinger, to name but two, 12th house sons. This can be the person expressing the prima donna syndrome, along with arrogance and pride, always the sign of a hard-placed or hard-angled sun. There's two ways the sun goes if it's in hard angles. Too timid, subservient, can't stand up for themselves, too arrogant, dominant, and proud, and so on. And you've got to get the sun back somewhere in the middle. So these are extreme expressions of the sun in hard angles. It's difficult not to express egotism covertly because the very core of the person, the self of the person, is split off from the rest of the psyche. I remember reading a damning criticism of Henry Kissinger's machinations in South America, where he was covertly expressing, I'm the man that can solve all the problems and all the rest of it, and actually he's creating havoc down there, over there. And he couldn't see it, but the journalist sure could. He wrote it up very clearly. His thinly disguised desire for glory and power. We'll come to that other meaning of 12th house. With this sun position, one has no sense of self initially, not in the early part of life. The child who felt a pawn in the game of life, often physically being sent from pillar to post. They felt they could not use their willpower. They were helpless in the desire to have any say in what happened to them. Go to boarding school, go to stay with your aunt, change countries. That sort of thing happens to 12th house sons. In some way, dealt them a blow which made the fledgling ego self son feel very insecure initially, leading to hopelessness and loss of motivation, which is your sun power. Father was very often away for long periods, as in the 39-45 war, for instance, or for some other reason. In the Navy, you can't get that psychological link with your father. The arrogance, egotism and pride are defense mechanisms. Always look with the 12th house planet. Look at your motives. What do you really want with your 12th house sun, or with your 12th house planet? And you can often come out in the open with when you look at your motives for going after something and you realise you're using your 12th house planet, look at your motives. What are you really going after? And bring it up and into the open if you possibly can. It's fear of using that planetary energy openly because it was damned so much when you were small that leads to evasiveness and deceptive manipulation or deceitful behaviour. Because we're scared. No other reason. No damning. You're just scared. And you learn a lot about the way Pisces operates as you watch the 12th house planetary energy work out. Pisces often doesn't go straight for what they want. They're very subtle water signs. So the Sun, Pluto and Mars in the 12th have many similarities, all connected with power, drive, strength of will. And there's usually acute sensitivity. Some children think they are the cause of their parents' divorce or their parents' departure with the Sun in the 12th, engendering massive guilt. 12th house sons often go into battle when there's no need to, and can have hair-trigger dispositions because their feelings of guilt fight with their very high idealism. Alternatively, 12th house people, and especially fire sons, may react absolutely passively when the situation calls for them to go into battle to justifiably defend themselves. Because remember the way that day they thought, it doesn't matter what I want, nobody's going to take any notice. So you think passively, I can't do anything about this situation, so you sit back very timidly. Either way, the sun is out of balance. Childhood with 12th house sun may be felt to be a very obscure period of life. The child may be shut away psychologically or physically, such as in a boarding school or even an orphanage if it's extreme. The ultimate strength of this sun position can be seen clearly in Gandhi's chart, who, unable to count any kind of total isolation, managed to get himself jailed at fairly frequent intervals. When he recharged his batteries, formulated his goals, and emerged totally rejuvenated from each bout in jail, much to the horror of the British. There's never-ending vitality, source of willpower to be called on to recharge your psychic motor with either the Sun, Mars, or Pluto here. Before the person discovers how to do this, in the so desperately needed solitude, they may tend to feel eternally weary and tired, and perpetually running out of steam. Planets here are not worldly planets, they're Pisces planets. If expressed out there in the world without sufficient time for a recharge, a person will run out of steam. Many famous 12th house sun people have, 12th house sun people do a lot in public, but they have a very private side, and they have times when they meditate and they need solitude where they go into their own space and they recharge their batteries. Even 5-minute cat naps or 5-minute periods of intense meditation in the lunch hour can recharge your batteries. The big advantage of this is, of course, that the 12th house sun person and all of us with 12 houses can constantly be in touch with our unconscious. And it's like a stream down to your unconscious, and you stand up or you go to say something or you go to solve something and you dig down into your unconscious for it to solve it, to say it, whatever you do. And it's like being in touch with the whole of you when you come to use it really well. And this is like getting in touch with your inner power, your inner source. The feeling is totally magnificent when you really get the hang of how to do it. I mean, you can't do it all the time. You know, we're fallible, infallible human beings, so that, what am I talking about? Fallible human beings, so that even though you think you've got to act together, something comes along and says, no, you haven't, but just, you're human, you know. The weariness can be intensified out of all proportion if any 12th house planet or the ruler of the cusp is hitched to Neptune, because Neptune dissipates and disperses. So you recharge your batteries so you won't get tired, and Neptune's draining it away furiously. So you have to learn to grab what energy you can in the way that you can before it all disappears and Neptune's taken it. So it's doubly hard from the point of view of being tired if you have Neptune hitched in any way to that 12th house planet. Often lots of sleep seems to solve the problem. One of the best ways of dealing with Sun, Mars or Pluto in the 12th, or Scorpio, Aries or Leo on that cusp, is to set a goal here and there and stick to it, no matter what the mood is, and get it done. Plod on, pretending you've got Saturn or Mars or something like that. So if you've got any 12th house planet, I say almost, depending on what it is, set a goal and stick to it, and you will do it, no matter what. If you stick to that, you're on the way to solving the drive that isn't there, so to speak. Call on the willpower, or visualize it being there all the time. Now the moon. This person sits on their emotional needs so much due to a lifetime's habit of thinking it's the only way to protect their vulnerability, that others don't take their emotions into account. The skin of the body of a 12th house moon from the face is often a bit dried up and crackly, much like a moon-Saturn aspect that you haven't dealt with. There is apparent emotional coldness which covers beautifully the oh-so-vulnerable emotional sensitivity that's hidden underneath. The emotional expression and the expectation that your emotional needs will be met is separated out from the self at a very early age due to some early trauma. The sort of trauma that's going to hit you is one student of mine told me, I have a lot to thank my students for, I get all these examples and so on. She was a cancer and she'd lost her first marriage after really trying very hard and many, many years, and she got a boyfriend, and the boyfriend was 10 years younger than her, and he had a big important business dinner. And he conveyed to her that she was too old to go along as the partner to present to his company. So she even incredibly rang up her girlfriends to see if they'd go along as his partner. Inside, her emotions were screaming at her, you are violating my emotional needs. But she still kept it hidden. But we hit this then, and out it all came. There often seems to be an incident in the child's life where somebody dies who's close to them, and the family will not allow they won't cry themselves. It happened to another student of mine. She was very, very close to her grandfather because her mother worked, and the grandfather looked after her, and she went on holiday somewhere when she was 4. And it's not always early on the 12th house planet. It's not one incident that throws a 12th house planet down. It's a cycle of events up to the age of 10, I've found, or even later. It goes on and on and on, reinforcing. And this lass was 4, was sent away for holiday. When she came back, grandfather was dead, and nobody explained death. Nobody cried. She called to him through the letterbox and he wasn't there, and nobody allowed her to express her grief. He was just gone missing. The family may cover the tracks like this because they can't cry, because they can't deal with death, because they can't express grief, or because they try to protect the child, little knowing that they're doing the most damning thing they can do to the child. So down the emotional expression went. You know, and she can remember now, before grandfather died, how much she expressed, and after, boom. And then it went on reinforcing all sorts of other incidents. So what to do? The situation is much the same as no planets in water signs. Take to the sauna, take to the bath. Long solitary baths is precisely what my 12th house moon class students do. Get the water circulating in the body. Squash, tennis, anything that makes you sweat to get the toxins out of the body. There's often a fear, like too much water in the chart, that if you let any emotion out, you're going to drown, like Noah's Ark situation. Let the emotion out little by little. When you see a situation that you think you should grieve over and you're not grieving, put your saddest bit of music over while you're in the bath, and try and get it out somehow. The suppression of a 12th house expression is so instantaneous, you won't know you've done it. You won't see the mechanism of repression. You won't know how you do it. It's quick and it's deep and it's just like grease lightning. So get it up. Transiting moon hitting planets. If your transiting moon hits Venus, hits something that makes you sad, little by little, and you know you've got the 12th house moon, let it out, and it won't frighten you anymore. That it's all kind of come out and drown you. So you can learn. We tend to think you can only work from inside out. I must go and be psychoanalyzed to get my 12th house moon out. You can work from the outside in, because the two meet. You can work by using your willpower, sun. You can work by letting your emotions out, moon. And work from the outside in, bathing, sweating, whatever you like. And gradually you'll find the emotion coming up. It will come up more easily, and then you can accept it. So you can work either way, inside out, outside in. So that covers Cancer cusp too on the 12th. Mercury in the 12th, or Virgo or Gemini there, ruling. Very often Mercury in the 12th indicates someone whose mental capabilities were ridiculed at school, or someone who was never listened to, or found it difficult to communicate their deep inner thoughts. Often, therefore, a bit of a loner, even in a crowd. Remember, there's a high degree of uncomfortability when you meet someone else who's expressing your repressed drive. So there's a great fear, and at the same time a fascination with people who are apparently Gemini types, very articulate and flinging across ideas, and you go into the horrors and think, oh gosh. Can be a person who states their views, the 12th house Mercury, and expects everyone else to hang on their every word. Early on in life there's constant misunderstandings and miscommunications. Relationships, of course, are not emphasized enough how Mercury affects relationship. It's a core ingredient in a relationship. And so if you've got a 12th house Mercury, it often comes up in relationships and produces some trouble. The person with a 12th house Mercury often thinks that the only safe place for these inner thoughts to be expressed safely and to emerge is when they're alone. So this is magnificent for authors, writers, anybody who has to do Mercury type work on their own in solitary state. But it's also like moon squaring Mercury. When you express your Mercury, very often you bring emotions into your arguments and your discussions when emotions should be right out. You can be your arguments and your discussions can be coloured by emotions, so you have to look at that one too. This is often the person who can't small talk because their thoughts are so deep and complex, or alternatively, to cover their inadequacies, they endlessly chat over superficial matters as a technique to cover their inadequacies. This is a high degree of nervous communication and worry, and usually this is a very self-critical person. There's a need to just communicate rather than keep silent, a need not to judge oneself or take note of others' judgment. The person can be very tired after prolonged communication, quite exhausted, but there's plenty of communication courses around that can help you with that one too. We've got a marvellous tool in astrology for getting at this 12th house. We can do it little by little by little. Venus, Libra or Taurus. Venus in the 12th, Taurus or Libra on the cusp. Often the family cannot show love and affection openly. The person is often temperamentally lazy. There can be feelings that one is uglier than anyone else, and very often this does have a justifiable cause. My sister is one of the most beautiful people I've ever seen. She looks like Grace Kelly. And she was born with long, shaggy hair right across her forehead. And it was operated on, I believe he's a New Zealander, Archibald McIndoe. And he cut it off and made a beautiful eyebrow out of it, and she's gorgeous, but she still has the Venus there. So it can have a solid reason why you think you're uglier than anyone else, but I get a 12th house Venus client sitting in front of me and I think, God, they're beautiful. They're unbelievably beautiful, because they've got the Pisces touch too. There's a denial of a Venus in the 12th that a prime necessity of life is a deep emotional relationship. And there can be very high expectations of a marriage or a relationship with consequent deep disappointments. The most common hang-up I found with a Venus in the 12th is a hidden love of money, pretending not to want it, but wanting it very much for security and comfort. Avariciousness is expressed in a very covert way. I used to often buy a lass in my law firm lunch I was outside and I was hurrying from the law courts. I'd buy both our lunches on the way in Stratocaster. And sometimes, if she bought it and I gave her my money, she'd want the 1 cent change. And I'd go, no, I think I only bought your lunch, a whole lunch yesterday, and you want the 1 cent change. But she never ever saw it. She really never saw it. I could have done my 12th house, know-it-all bit, Mars, and pointed it out. But I thought, oh, she'll come to it at her own good time, So you have to look at all these little patterns of behaviour in the 12th house.
It's not why I pick up 5 things off the street because the 12th house thing.
Thank you.
I'm trying to reprogram.
There can be, I dare say it now, you expose it. Thank you for that. Thank you for anyone that says anything about 12th house. There can be self-indulgence, vanity and narcissistic tendencies. It's very hard to get through to the feelings of a 12th house Venus person because the person pushes love and affection away while needing it very much, making it very hard for others to bridge their gap, bridge their bridge. So if you've got a child, especially with any 12th house planet, you know what they need. You know that if they've got 12th house Venus, they can't express love. You cross their bridges and give them great big hugs. You cross their bridges and give them massages and strokes and kissing goodnight and all this sort of thing. It's absolutely marvellous when it comes to children. Again, admit love needs with this one. Admit that you deep down need a very rewarding relationship. Practice showing affection. If you've got Venus in the 12th, just practice putting your arm around your favourite friend or your husband or your lover or whatever. Keep doing it, and gradually that awful hang-up you'll get over. I've seen people meet people off planes who haven't met for several years. The 12th house person can't even go up and go, woof. Do it. If you have it, do it, and it won't be such a hang-up. Remember, we have Pisces Venus here, exalted in the knowledge of the prospering power of love. There is a deep understanding of how universal love is the key to all our knowledge. There's only love and fear. Anything else comes from fear. If you're on love, there is no fear. If you're on fear, you get hatred, resentment, vengeance, what? You've got the choice. 2. That's all, and no more. Mars, 12th, Aries, Scorpio cusp. I've mentioned a fair bit about Mars because it's mine, so I really feel I understand it. It's the one planet that needs action of some sort physically to prevent its being very destructive. If Mars is in air, even mental action like writing uses the energy. Masturbation can be a problem, but do see what they've got in the chart. I've this time Neptune, which totally contradicts it, but a lot of clients, and when I've done this before, I had some very beautiful sharing from a lot of people who came up and told me a lot about 12 houses. And so it can be a problem because the person has to see erotic pictures to get in the right frame of mind for lovemaking. And I understand that very well with Mars. You can make a beautiful scene up there with your Mars 12, thoroughly enjoy it, or with whatever you've got in the 12th house. But you've got to be aware that it's your imagination that can actually get in the way and can be a detriment rather than a help. I think, I know that the person with Mars here is often made to feel ashamed, disgusted, repelled, or disapproved of in some sexual way when young. There can be a usual typical childhood thing, I'll show you mine if you show me yours. And I got caught by, it was a cousin with me behind the garage, and his mother caught us, and when I came to that one, I thought, good gracious, is that all it was? And I built this thing up here. So very young kids go through and often get found out, and they're very heavily punished. Whatever the incident, the idea of sex is threatening and suppressed, and energy will not go away, and the sexuality of children is often very strong, especially right from the word go, believe it or not. So little children with Mars here resort to air, thinking, water, dreaming, or maybe doing something very furtively with your Mars, earth or fire. Hence in the adult, orgasm can be quite difficult without some sort of fantasy going on. Sexual satisfaction can also be difficult because one is not making love to the real person, but the person with whom one is dreaming, or with whom one is making fantasy, without doing it in actual fact. So the partner gets the picture pretty smartly, and the whole thing loses out on the real essence of intercourse at very deep levels, remember. The partner realises that you're not making love to them, that you've got something else going on. You can't see it, remember, but everybody else can. 12th house. Once you realise that, you get very open about whatever you've got in the 12th house. It's getting there anyway. So the partner... Pardon?
I've got Mars and Neptune and lived in the 12th house, and I've experienced some of those things, masturbation, the fantasies and so forth. the fascination with action or violence and so on.
Yes.
But I've tried to get away from that now.
Yeah, it can be quite enjoyable, but it is a sort of detriment as well. Thank you for sharing that. The partner with whom you're in a relationship realises that you're not really there sometimes, and gets the picture pretty quickly, and intercourse and lovemaking miss out on the deeper level. This often occurs only with hard angle planets. If you're a planet in the 12th and very easy angles, you've got easy way out. You see it easy. I'm lucky. I've got a sextile to the Sun and Moon from my Mars, but it can be quite difficult. I can see that from clients. So we're back to guilt and how it's accepted as a self-punishment. And kids with Mars in the 12th, when they're punished for some normal sexual activity, have an awful lot of guilt surrounding the whole thing about sex. And a form of self-punishment. I'm so disgusting, I really must feel so guilty, so I punish myself. With Mars here can sleep a lot because it's Mars your petrol in the engine, and he ain't got that, the engine doesn't go. There's a tendency to be too afraid to take the initiative or to assert one's own desire, like saying, this was my one, do it because so-and-so wants it, when in actual fact it was me who wanted it, you know. And the person I pulled this one on was a very well-known Sydney astrologer who's also a psychotherapist. He said, just look at your Mars in the 12th. Who wants it? I do. I was too timid to say so, you know, because a lifetime's habit of not being able to get what I wanted stopped me going to do it directly. So I did it indirectly. That's the mechanism. So very often with Mars, Pluto or Uranus, one of the more difficult planets, you do need something like psychotherapy on top of astrology to get at what you are going through. But this is a big chance of going through, you'll do that anyway. Just watching one's daily behaviour and knowing what the planet is can pull it out of the 12th house. We come back to awareness time and time again. I've noticed that Mars in the 12th is very like Mars in Pisces for women, in that they seem to want to relate to a man who lifts the sexuality of Mars up to sort of spiritual level. Mars 12th, Mars Pisces women can marry ministers of religion, for instance, something like that. They don't want the earthiness of Mars, they want something a little bit more. Or both. You can have your cake and eat it too, remember? No rules. Right, Jupiter in the 12th is a nicety with reservations. We're looking at Sagittarius on the cusp, it co-ruled by Neptune we're looking at Jupiter, Sagittarius or Pisces on the cusp, because Jupiter co-rules Pisces. It's a nicety with reservations, a feeling there's a cosmic handhold in life no matter what occurs, a beautiful ability to support others through one's own faith. This is the person who can keep their own counsel and the secrets of other people, if the Jupiter's in good angles. If it's not, then they can be the undependable people in daily life. There can be a waste of natural potential if Jupiter's in the 12th. And it's the person who really does have to look at hidden motives, because they often think, I'm the only good one. I don't need to do any work. I don't need to understand my own behaviour because I'm okay. There can be, they can have the high ideals without doing the necessary groundwork to put these high ideals into practice. So Jupiter is our social glue also, remember. So depending on the rest of the chart, and please don't take the 12th house out of context, this can be the person who doesn't like to socialise very much with Jupiter in the 12th, because they put their sociability into the 12th and they don't want it. Right, Saturn, with Capricorn and Aquarius on the 12th house cusp. Or Aquarius. Saturn energy is extremely tricky to have split off from the rest of oneself, or not under the dominion of the total sun self. The game of life seems impossibly hard and the rules incomprehensible when you're a child with 12th house Saturn, because the child does not have a psychological bond with father so desperately needed. He may be there, but that child has not, I'll stake my life on it, has not got the psychological bond with father to the degree the child wants it. So desperately needed. This bond with a physical father is needed because it's the father's rule to show us through the polarity with Jupiter that the rules can be learned little by little and need not be beyond the child's abilities, nor scary.
Why not the mother?
It can be the mother. If there's no father, mother can represent authority. A grandfather, a grandmother can represent authority. The church, if you're sent to there, can represent, Saturn is authority. Take it as authority in your home.
Psychological bond to authority.
To some person that you regard as authority, the child regards it. Jupiter, Saturn balance. Jupiter's protection, Saturn's while learning. And if you've got Jupiter trine Saturn, you have protection whilst learning. Protection whilst learning is not found with Saturn in the 12th unless it's trine Jupiter and it's close in aspect. Hence, it is the understanding of feeling that one can cope, can deal and confront the world in physical, material terms that is separated off from the self. Internally, there can be feelings that chaos is just a hair's breadth away. Saturn in Pisces can generate this feeling too. There are no defined edges to this chaos because it's the house of Pisces with which we are dealing. You ask someone with Saturn in the 12th to define what they regard as chaos or something like that, and they don't know. It's just fear of the unknown that goes on and on and on. Bogies everywhere. Two solutions normally taken by the person. One is to structure their life to such a degree that it's almost snuffed out. The other one is to deny life itself by isolating oneself so much that nothing comes into the life that might upset the apple cart in any way. And I had a student, a client, who had this. She spent most of her days in her dining room with a big glass window knitting, looking out on the world that was going by. And time again, I've had Saturn 12 people describe it as the glass house effect. So that's my term now, the glass house effect. Perhaps these... No, that you're not part of life. You're out there watching it through a window. You're watching life go by as a panorama of which you are not part. You've got to see it. You've got to have a window to see it, you see.
But you so much fear of the unworldly.
Right. They've got to see it, but they want to see that life is there. Well, if you were really bad, I suppose, if you really had a very hard angle Saturn, you could get yourself confined in an asylum and have a dark room. But mostly Saturn with the 12th, we deal with for X number of years before we even got the 12th house planet. But the feeling initially somewhere along the way is, I'm not part of life, I'm separated, but I can see it, all this marvellous panorama and things on the stage going by, and I'm not part of it. It's too scary to join, in other words. Too scary to join. If I joined it, what would happen? Would this happen and that fall apart, and the chaos is just there? So there's this feeling of, oh my gosh, it's safer to stay where I am. And you snuff out life. Yes. Well, this is the first thing I was talking about. You structure the life so much that the boundaries that you have erected seem so impossibly firm that you don't know how to knock them down. And you need a good Uranian transit hitting that Saturn or something like that to knock it down for you.
Would you give this applying to people who become workaholics? Who work in cities, they've got no time for anything, and they...
I wouldn't ever say yes, because it could be part of the structure they've made to guard their Saturn fear in the 12th. It could be. You'd have to look at the whole chart.
You found medical symptoms like agoraphobia,
Yes, and Pluto in the 12th, it's fear of crowds. It's specifically fear of clouds and crowds, and it also can be agoraphobia. It can be fear of being in any situation where you have no control. Fear and Saturn. So put that any way you like, you know. Perhaps the two solutions of isolating yourself or structuring your life so that it's almost snuffed out are the same. We had a marvellous example when I was writing this. My daughter has a friend with Saturn in the 12th, trine Mars, born 1967. Saturn's in, gosh, where is it? No, Aries. Trine Mars in Sag. And every time the three other friends made an appointment or a date or going to the flicks, they were only 16 at the time, this lass got left out because she lived in another suburb. And she found that life was impossibly hard. She couldn't join. Why did it always go wrong? Why wasn't I included? And she felt that, what could she do? You know, what could she do to assert herself so that she wasn't left out of all these things? And I found out, and I found she had a 12th house Saturn, so we all sat down and discussed it. But the other way it came up was my daughter got a scholarship to Uruguay, and Penny, this girl with the 12th house Saturn, went with my daughter to the consulate to get her visa. And Kate went in for a visa, and Penny was violently ill. She vomited all in the consulate all the way home. And she came home with me. She was so sick, I was going to run her home. She couldn't move. And I said, you know, change is not that frightening. Kate will be back. You won't lose your friend. That's what your fear is. And we went through, and that's when she came out with all this 12th house Saturn, and that's how it manifested. And what she was actually trying to do, when I said if illness can be a 12th house manner of making other people feel guilty, she was trying very hard to make Kate feel guilty too. So I stepped in there and said, hey, you can write. For goodness sake. Now Penny copes with higher school by doing a bit of... Yes, it was in Aries in 1967. She copes with higher school by doing a bit every night. She's a very bright lady, and she does a bit every night, so the scary chaos of failing and not dealing with the reality of life is not going to hit her. She has got a very great help in the Saturn trine Mars. So that's how Saturn works. The bonds are very deep with the father, but the father is in some way resented or despised, and ambition is covertly up front. Immense ambition with Saturn in the 12th, and unacknowledged motives to get to the top of the tree, and they need a damn good scrutiny with Saturn in the 12th. I know I work with a senior partner in a law firm who is busy furthering his ambition, writing articles for big important journals all day while the rest of the partners were doing the work. And he couldn't see it. Eventually I did his chart and I thought, can I hit this one? And I thought, yeah, little by little we can trickle it out. So these people with Saturn in the 12th need to acknowledge that they are extraordinarily ambitious. But ambition is not a dirty word. Noble ambition is the cornerstone of Capricorn. And most Capricorns, or any element of it in the character, once you've, and Moon, Sun, Saturn is all the same thing. You find that once you've toiled up the summit, up the mountain to get to the summit, it's not for your own status you did all the work, but so that you know what it's like there and you can climb down and help other like-minded goats up there too to have a look at the view. So that's what Capricorn's about. Ambition is okay, fine, make it noble ambition. Therefore, this is the other element of the 12th house. Every time you work for your own status and your own ambition or your own needs, it doesn't work. You have to do it for society, for the larger whole, so that you come to understand the larger whole and no boundaries. Once you do it and you admit you're ambitious and you're doing it for you so that you can give more to society, which is Capricorn, the chaos becomes copable with, and you get your act together and the fear dies down and dissipates. One way I found, I always like to be practical about these things, of Saturn in the 12th, dealing with it, is to deal with what's in front of one's nose, absolutely running day by day. What's in front of me, it's Monday. Deal with the here and now. Cope with that. Let Tuesday and Wednesday take care of themselves. Just do enough to plan your week if you have to, but just concentrate on coping with what's in front of your nose. And this you need to tell to a child with 12th house Saturn. You get immense feelings of self-sufficiency and the ability to accomplish a great deal in life. There's an inner strength, a purpose that the now acknowledged ambitions can be put to good use, and one gets the status one wants through working hard for others. Incidentally, a funny quirk with Saturn in the 12th I found when I do a lot of children's charts, or did in Wishley, is that it can be the third or fourth child where the rest of the family waits on them hand and foot, and they still don't understand the game of life, the reality of it. Even one person told me that when she was 2 or 3, she was trying to open doors, and all the other kids came in and opened doors for her. And she can't drive anywhere now. She can't deal with Saturn's normal reality and daily workings because she had so much done for her. There's a fear. So her husband drives her everywhere.
And then I also get something else if I work for others, then I take myself, and then I feel like that's myself. And that gives me another sort of happiness.
So it's with and not for. And not for.
And
Thank you.
kind of collective or a common problem.
Yes. Yes. But you may find with Saturn connected there that you've become the leader of the group because you get your ambition and your status, but it's with others. With and for are tied in there, but it ends up for, even though it's with. But always with 12th house, there's this degree of weariness, and you just have to learn to live with it to some degree and do what you want to do in your own mechanism. Right, Uranus or Aquarian on the cusp. I always remember my first confrontation with a 12th house Uranus person. I took my children back to England in '69, and I rented a flat, being very independent, and the next door person was two Virgo ladies and a man and their brother, all unmarried. It's a real Agatha Christie type of situation, you know. You expected the pikelets to be poisoned or something. We're very, very proper. And anyway, I went in there and he said, "Oh, come at 4 o'clock." Everything was defined nicely, and I went in at 4 o'clock. And I absolutely got a shock of my life because every tiny patch of the ground floor of their house was covered in mounted spiders. And he just stood back and watched me go, "Oh, God, amazing." And I'm not frightened of spiders, but I was just totally amazed that anybody could have that many spiders from all over the world, hung, mounted, what have you. And this hobby that this Uranian 12th person had could either be could be scientific, could be electronics, could be astrology, could be interior decorating. I've known 5 interior decorators with Uranus in the 12th, including students. So you can have any of these unusual things. Now, the core of this position is, it means you share your individuality, your secret radical philosophies, your unusual hobbies, your unusual thoughts, with those you trust only very, very well. You won't do it with people you don't trust very, very well. So it's your very close friend that you trust intimately will you share your secrets with. I guess this guy got enough, well, he was a very well-known world authority on the spiders. He got it out of hiding, this Uranus. Hard angles to Uranus bring out the negativity. It can indicate the person who wants to walk alone, the eternal rebel, or the person who stays alone because of unconscious feelings that no one will befriend them, because they are too odd, too different. There can be a deep inner tension because of the desire to rebel through the effort called for to conform and quash one's individuality. It can be a terribly nice person who's totally squashed their Uranus in the 12th, who doesn't come across authentically, and we can all see it, but they can't. The Uranus energy can emerge suddenly, taking both the owner and recipients totally by surprise. You know, I never thought you could do that, and down it goes again. My neighbour stood quietly back, looking like the cat that swallowed the canary when he saw.
Chris, I just want to go back to these interests and rather weird ones and things. I've got Uranus pulled into my 12th to a trine from the 8th and 12th. And as some of you know, I'm passionately interested in zoos as well as astrology. But it always strikes me as rather funny that to astrologers I'm a weirdo because of my interest in zoos, and to my zoo friends I'm a weirdo because of my interest in astrology.
Don't let it go down.
I feel a little isolated, you know, just stuck in there in the middle.
Have a television area in the shape of Uranus and stick it up on your house, and it's out of hiding. Right. Uranians tend to feel there's no early freedom to be themselves, using boarding schools for illustration. Even the leisure hours are structured. I damn well want to do my own thing, and they never get allowed to. The outer planets do need special recognition because they're the planets of the collective unconscious pushed into our deep unconscious. They're harder to recognize and harder for the owner to find just what to do with them. Neptune or Pluto here, or Uranus, are really quite difficult. So I'm trying to skip a little bit because it's me talking all the time, and I'm sorry, but I just want to get you this lot, you know, together so we can share quickly. Finish that one. Okay, Neptune. I can't find many people. I used to have any there, but I've got many who will tell me how Neptune in the 12th works. They simply can't see it. The planet of illusion in the house of illusion, so it's not surprising. 2 things emerge from clients and students. There's a horror of chaos again, a dread of the lack of Saturn in the life, hence this person can be quite fearful. The imaginative faculty for creative ideals is often suppressed, until in finding Neptune, easier than the other outer planets because it's exalted here, of course, it's in its own house. One realises that one has these immense creative imagination to use in whatever way one realises. Also, it's a bit like a Saturn-Neptune aspect, in that one realises the structure of Saturn are only the rules of the game of earthly reality, and are ultimately an illusion, and that's a very big bicky when you get that one. And then one can be comfortable with seeming chaos. The imaginative faculty can be used in private and released on all sorts of creative things, anything you like to choose. There's a deep compassion. Your woes are my woes, and I can feel your suffering as if it's my own suffering. So there's a need to be around very positive people, or you go down very fast. But this compassion is not recognised by others as such, but repressed. Chris pointed this out to me, and thank you very much. This compassion and profound compassion that you have is not recognized by your family. So you chuck it away. It's one of your best qualities and you don't use it. Fear of using the psychic energy one has is another fear of the 12th house Neptune. And you find it's very profound and very accurate very often. Ultimately, you come to the understanding of unity and oneness and no boundaries, but you can't express that realization again. It's like cosmic consciousness that you can't express, but it's a deep inner support because this is Neptune's house. If there are hard angles, you wonder where come all these bad vibes and feelings. How do I feel so awful? And it's just infiltrating. A tremendous desire to escape, and a person may spend too much time over there. I will come back to you, Helen, I did see. The feeling that, I had a very dangerous example. Because I did child psychology diploma, I often got used to accepting children's charts very early on, and I copped some whoppers. And one of them was a friend of mine who happened to mention this one day, that her daughter went and shut herself in her bedroom for very long periods, and she was about 7 or 8. And it wasn't normal. So I said, well, all right, give me the chart. And she had Neptune in hard angles in the 12th. And I went and saw the little girl on her own. And what she used to do, she had curtains with all sorts of figures on. And she made a world in her curtains. And she went to bed, lay in the bed, and went into her world. And because she was spending so much time there, she was getting slowly psychotic. And we had to draw her out, change the curtains, but keep one curtain. So, okay, have that sometime, but don't do that too often. And gradually we drew it out. And it was because she had such a loaded 12th house, Neptune was there too, that she was not getting the understanding she needed. Now, Helen, sorry.
I was just going to say, another thing that I found with Neptune in the 12th house is that really, particularly the aspect of course, people have recalled past times so easily. They grow with those memories.
I think, yes, that the it's boundless Neptune, and it's in the boundless house, so you can go in any direction you like. If it's in hard angles, don't become sort of an evangelist, because you're not sure what you're getting is accurate. But if it's in pure, nice, easy angles, I would say trust what's coming to you, you know.
I've got Neptune in the 12th, and when I was a child, I used to have visions and things like that, and hear voices. And I was really about 19 before I realised my mother had actually convinced me that I was quite mad. And the other thing is I dream in colours, and I dream in black and white.
Interesting. Can you begin to see how the mechanism gets pushed down? You went and told 5-year-old, you told mother you dreamed in black and white and colour, and that you heard voices. You can imagine what would happen, can't you?
The other thing that I did when I was a teenager, when I was totally unaware of what was going on, I used to be in tea.
In what?
I used to be in tea, even though in my handbag there would be a screen or anything like that. Doesn't happen anymore, but when I was a teenager it was a real worrisome.
Yes, these outer planets are especially unusual. So if you've got children with especially unusual conditions in their 12th house, listen to what they say. Allow them to tell you what's going on in their 12th house.
Along those same lines, a slightly different manifestation of it is that when I was a child, I wouldn't go and play with the other children. I'd collect every dog in the district around and play with them. And I'd sit out and sleep with every dog around me.
Because they would respond to your beautiful compassion.
But that was also my world. I got out of the world of people and into the world of animals.
Yeah.
And people used to say, why are you playing with dogs? Don't play with the children. What play with them? They're cruel.
Yes. That's it. They responded to your compassion.
So I did it in that sense rather than in this sense.
Yes. There are thousands of ways, literally, that these can manifest. But once you get the mechanism and you get the core meanings, you're okay. Pluto, we're nearly there. I found repeatedly with Pluto in the 12th house, I'm sorry, I'm still going faster, lass. I realise halfway through that I haven't slowed down at all. There's an ending of some sort. Now, it can be, and it's at a very vulnerable age in the child's life. Very often it's the death of someone important to the child, often the father. There can also be a marital split or a sibling dying or going away. If there's divorce, the family split up. The death forces the child to realise his own creative potential very early in life and to turn towards the thought of sex and death and so on. Or the child can have an ending in that he's made to leave a friend that he's really close to, or a school, or a home, or a country, or a district. There's an ending. That's what Pluto says in the 12th. And the great power of the Pluto person can be felt subconsciously by other people and has to be dealt with. You just feel that there. And it can be expressed in a briefly, so down it goes. Usually it's the tremendous willpower of the child who wants to do things here and it's squashed. The ending causes a tremendous soul searching, but the child doesn't know. Remember, we don't remember with 12th house. We can't recall the incident, we can't recall the mechanism. It's too painful, so it's there without anything. So if you get clients, students, your own children, be terribly careful when you tread into the 12th house. And unless you can cope with it, and you know you can, leave it alone. Like the Sun and Mars, there are feelings of powerlessness at a very deep level, more than the energy of Mars and the ego of the Sun. There's a very great feeling that you cannot use your own power. The loss of will here convinces the child he can do absolutely nothing to turn the tide of events to his own advantage, like fighting the forces of darkness. Hence the planet of the subconscious or the collective unconscious is rendered very much stronger by being pushed with emotion into the subconscious to become a veritable torrent. With Pluto here, it's usually a skeleton in the cupboard in adult life, which funnily enough is known by the owner of the Pluto here. It can vary from a term in prison for a minor offence, which is experience of a client of mine, to my brother's own situation, where his fiancée committed suicide and he found her hanging there because he could not disentangle himself from our mother, and we both have Moon Pluto, so it was pretty heavy numbers. So this skeleton in the cupboard that's known in adulthood covers another skeleton that's known in that is not remembered from childhood, which I'll expand on later. Although it's difficult for one to accept one's will and power and sexuality and emotional brutality, we've all got the animal in us, no kidding, even our Neptunian people. This is the planet of transformation. Very often brutality is experienced from others, emotional brutality. It's Pluto answering the brutality in us. This is Pluto anywhere. If you've got Pluto in the 9th, you cop other people's fanaticism. If you've got it in the 7th, you cop manipulative, strong partners. If you've got it in the 2nd, you have to deal with emotional and material Scrooges. It's answering the Pluto in you. So it needs transforming and you're seeing it through someone else. So in the 12th, you cop emotional brutality that comes at you very covertly from whoever's in your environment. Pluto in the 12th gives one the ability to transform and regenerate the contents of the unconscious, but only if the person is willing to cross the river Styx at the time of a suitable transit of a planet travelling through the 12th house, or making an angle to the planet in it, or making an angle to the ruler of the 12th house. So Pluto's got to do something to the planet in the 12th house, or the ruler of the cusp of the 12th house, and that's a lovely time to get at the contents of your unconscious. There's another river in hell called the waters of Lethe, and these are called the waters of forgetfulness, and you draw on them. And you come to the great compassion of the 12th house when you're dealing with this sort of thing at a deep level, and you forgive yourself, which is what all 12th house people have to do. Forgive yourself first for having that energy there. And when you come to do that, you can make the things really flow. And I rather like that waters of forgetfulness, because they were flowing through hell as a healing balm to all souls. Back to the childhood skeleton I mentioned. Freudian implications of this are quite tremendous. I'm giving you a horrific example, but graded all along the way. This is a real Pluto one because it was quite something. This child had everything in the 12th, opposing the moon in the 6th. Son of a student of mine. He was like a little old man. He talked to you like an 80-year-old with all the wisdom of the ages. He had Pluto there. He had everything else there. He had the sun there in Scorpio and a Scorpio ascendant. It was the end of Pluto Libra that he had. When he was quite small, 3.5, his parents split up. When he was 4, he told his father he was going to marry his mother. Shortly after he dreamt that he and his younger brother were castrated. He was then told by his mother, after she had learnt of the graphic description of his imaginary sex life with her, that she couldn't marry him. It was a taboo of society. Taboo is a very Pluto word. He became very distressed at this news and continued to worry about this and his own death and his sexuality. And he wanted Jesus to get the nails out of his hands so that he could be born again and save him. Oedipus, of course, desired the death of his father and union with his mother. And all 4-year-olds go through this. All 4-year-old boys, I should say. It seems that when the parents separate or the parent of the opposite sex dies, the Pluto child thinks his willpower was so strong he did it. And it's very unusual, it's very deep, it's very powerful, but it's there. So, my gosh, I can do that, and I cause a death or a separation. And remember, the in love with the parent of the opposite sex is a temporary thing, and when you come out of it, you've then caused a demise of somebody you actually love very much, and you need it. So this poor Pluto child is then left with this extraordinary guilt that he's actually caused the demise of someone who he needed and who loved him very much. So it causes immense feelings of guilt, and down goes Pluto's energy into the deep unconscious. In the case of the desire of the small boy, it was so strong that he was overwhelmed by it. And it's the very quality Pluto calls on always, anywhere, to be transformed is desire. So this poor little lad called on the superhero Jesus, who makes it his business to do such things, to forgive him for the massive guilt that he felt for removing his father while he was in love with his mother. The child has to transcend the awesome feelings of power and sexuality. He had to go for minor, he had to go to a child psychologist to get it out. So that was quite lucky that we hit it, because it would have been so complicated, mixed up with the rest of his 12th house and opposing his 6th house moon, that we thought dealing with it there and then would help him. So there can be very deep guilt surrounding death or sex, an overwhelming fear that the power and the fury will all emerge full strength at the same time, feelings if people only knew me, they would give me a wide berth, and a very great, because if you think you've killed someone or removed someone, you don't think the rest of the world really wants to know you. And a very great fear of groups and crowds, thank you, Alia, somewhat like Saturn-Pluto conjunction. The feeling at times of a volcano being on the boil, but with the lid on it. The power, as I said, seems to be constantly taken from the person in early life situations. My brother was sent to boarding school on the death of his father. Father died when he was 3.5 to 4, right at the wrong age. He was sent to boarding school at 5 because mother didn't want him to grow up with a lot of women. He had Saturn in Cancer, and he was desperately unhappy for most of his school life. What he told me later, that he cried every day for about 6 months at school without his mother. He was sent to an English public boarding school, which is one of the most horrendous things I think you can do with anyone. And he told me later, when he did go into a lot of stuff when his fiancée committed suicide, that he was terrified someone would run off with his mother as a punishment to him because he somehow caused the death of his father. You know, he was sent away by mother, so he wondered what the hell it, and there's all this moon Pluto and the 12th guilt tied up. You can't imagine what it does. I'm just sort of, at that stage, so amazed at what the unconscious can do to us. This is dramatic. Please don't run away thinking all this happens to Pluto all the time. There are grades of it, but it's very deep. Now for the strength.
I could give you a little light grade of it.
Good, good. Thank you.
A Pluto and the 12th that unveiled a whole film that happened to them that basically...
Excuse me just a minute. Can you all hear? Can you turn and face them? Because it's rather... Yeah, well, it's, everything's...
the teddy bear, they were the parents, and they're very attached to their teddy bear. They were only young. And teddy bear fell off the bridge into said stream, so floating down the stream. He went hysterical at death. The teddy bear wanted parents to get teddy bear, and for logistical reasons it was impossible to get teddy bear. So the child was concerned, parents didn't try and get teddy bear, you know?
Yes.
The parent and the child went through this whole grief thing, and was told, don't pursue it, we'll get from another bear. You know what I mean? So it was, that's just a live example of the expression of it all, the whole...
Yes.
Yes. It was to the extreme one.
Yes.
But had the same with the way that
It's
played through.
yeah, you see, I think it's a marvellous example of, doesn't matter what you've got with circumstances, if you've got the Pluto there, you suck it in, and it's as dramatic to a child with a teddy bear as it is to father. It means the same, and the drama played out in the subconscious is the same, in the unconscious, and it's quite as important. I mean, when you see children attached to those, it's not a thing, it's somebody so important to the child that we must take children really seriously, you know, and not impose our adult standards on them. Right, nearly there. Now for the strength. The power, the very great power and strength of this position can be called on whenever. It indicates a person who has the potential to solve psychological problems, both their own and other people's. A superb, and I can't emphasize this enough, natural psychologist who can poke about quite happily in the unconscious of themselves and on other people's unconscious. A person of tremendous resourcefulness, or a person who can manipulate others' weakness for their own advantage or covert destruction. There can be secrecy about one's private affairs to the point of ridiculousness if Pluto is in hard angles. Like Pluto anywhere, such energy can poison the emotional unconscious, but in the 12th it is unacknowledged and can accumulate and become sexually aggressive or full of vengeance. Or you can be this superb person who helps other people. I have a friend who does that. She's marvellous. She's a psychologist. Both Mars and Pluto here can harbour resentments to the extent of masochism and can become top of the martyr's hit parade. All 12th house planets can tend to the syndrome Pisces some people know all about, nailed to the cross again, and about which they seemingly can do nothing. Pisces and all 12th house people choose their path for their own special purposes. Again, we have to look at deep unconscious motives. Pluto here can go up and become detached with the eagle, becoming the natural psychologist in life. Absolute awareness is available to them, both for the transformation of themselves first and for them to help other people after. Always with Pluto, you work on yourself first. They can use the purging, healing energies of the unconscious to do this. This enables all the accumulated psychic garbage to be refined in the incinerator of forgiveness. Christ carried the scars of the cross forever, and so do all 12th house people. But Christ also had the resurrection. To surrender the use of the planet in the 12th for selfish ends so that they can be used for unselfish purposes hurts like hell. Finally, all planets in the 12th house particularly, and all planets ruling the 12th house, need to be expressed via the medium of social good and not personal glory. If there is personal glory, it happens incidentally. Hence, to work behind the scenes in institutions, etc., is felt to be comfortable and appropriate. Ultimately, we can get the grand cosmic big bicky, the release of the little I, of the self-important ego, so that the big I of the true self can manifest totally. The realization we are all blades of grass and can all make a contribution to the greater good or the whole without personal reward. And this is the necessary goal of all 12th house people. And we who have 12th house emphasis have come all the way from Aries to Pisces with our particular 12th house drive. Thank you.